Hi, welcome back. It's a powder foundation review week. Last week I reviewed L'Oreal's Infallible, the new drugstore powder foundation. This week I'm reviewing the much anticipated Fenty Beauty powder foundation. I think this launched the day after Christmas and my DMs immediately were like, please review. So I ordered it immediately, and you all know I like to test things out for at least a week before I give a proper review, which is what I've done on this powder. I've actually had it for a little over a week. So I've had different ways to test it. I've tested it under different circumstances, if you will. And yeah, we're gonna dive into this. I'm gonna try to be as clear and concise as possible. So let's just go ahead and start. So 36 bucks comes in 49 shades, and those shades should correspond with the liquid because I ordered the powder in the same shade I wear in the liquid, which is the shade 150. It's a good light toned powder, and it's neutral, not too much yellow, not too much pink, just somewhere in between. I want to read you the description on this because it's very interesting, and the details on it say it's a light as air powder foundation that gives you a light to full coverage with a soft matte finish. But then when you look underneath and it lists the coverage level, it says the coverage level is medium. But in the description, it says you can get full coverage. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we get a little further along into the review. So I want to cut to the chase and tell you who I think this powder foundation is going to benefit most, because I think it'll help you understand the formulation a little bit better as I talk more about it and how I applied it. Most of you know I have normal to dry skin, so I was a little hesitant when I ordered this because the Fenty liquid does tend to run a little bit more matte on my skin, or a little bit more flat. And powder foundations and compacts, they do tend to have a matte finish, which this one does. It clearly says in the description that you are going to get a matte finish. So this is a very matte powder foundation. I do think I want to just go ahead and caution you right off the bat. I think that this powder foundation is going to benefit combo to oily people best. I have been wearing it for over a week, and I have normal to dry skin. I can tweak it, and I'll share those ways that I tweak it to make it work and make it look a little bit more glowy on my skin, but ultimately it does feel on my skin like a drier powder foundation. I also have to ensure that I moisturize before applying this powder foundation. There is absolutely no way I can wear this on just bare skin and head out the door. Oh, it's just, nope. I need the moisture underneath. I need something for it to almost emulsify before going on top of this dry Sahara desert. I have applied this two different ways. I have applied it with the sponge that comes in the compact, and also with my trusty bareMinerals Beautiful Finish powder foundation brush. I tried both ways because the only review I have watched on this is the review or demo that Rihanna did applying it. I haven't watched any other reviews yet, and she used the sponge for like targeted areas and then a brush to diffuse like on the outer perimeters of the face. So for the first few days, I applied this with just the sponge. I didn't use a brush or anything. I wanted to see how this applied with the sponge because it just seems that pressed powder foundations especially are kind of moving back into that sponge trend. For my skin type, again, normal to dry, the sponge really brought out some dryness on my face. The dragging of the sponge it just really did a lot of exfoliation, and I definitely had just little dry patches popping up in areas that are common for me. So the first day applying this with the sponge, I thought to myself, oh boy, I'm going to have a run for my money with this review because I do not think that this is going to work. I just want to say the sponge with this particular powder, it's not my favorite. I find that I have to apply several layers to even get a medium finish or a medium coverage with it. And it just feels really heavy and really dry on my skin type. However, if you are combination oily, I think you would prefer the sponge because it's going to be a little bit more absorbent. It does give you a smooth application. I just really found that I just kept having to apply it to get the coverage that I wanted. So then on about day 3 or 4, I switched to the Beautiful Finish powder foundation brush, and I much prefer this. For some reason, I feel like I can get better coverage on the outer perimeters of my face. If I want a little bit more coverage on my under eye area, the sponge does come in hand for that like small target application, but that's the only time I'm kind of down with the sponge. My preferred way is the brush, and that doesn't change the fact that it's still matte. It's still a flat finish on my face, but overall when I use the brush, I feel like it's a little bit more diffused and a little bit more even for me. Also does not feel as heavy because I'm really working it into my skin, and it's not just sitting flat on top of my skin as opposed to using the sponge in like sweeping motions. So with that being said, 2 application methods, I still feel like I could just get about a medium coverage. I don't feel like it really surpassed that. So if you have scarring, severe redness that you are wanting to cover, I do think you would have to wear something underneath this. And this powder foundation really does fall into the category for me. I talked about this with L'Oreal Infallible. I kind of have a bone to pick with powder foundations that can't be built up to the full coverage level. I don't know why, because I don't have that problem with liquids, but in my powder, for some reason, I want it to be built up to the max if I need it. And for this one, I feel like it definitely did just go to that medium coverage level. It's also a very tightly packed powder foundation, so you don't have a ton of emollients when you go in with your brush or your sponge. So that's why I found that I was having to go in and just like reapply to get the coverage that I wanted. Something that I really do like about this powder foundation is that it has a really good longevity on me, or it has a good long wearing status, if you will. I found that even working out in it, wearing a mask to the grocery store in it, really didn't bother it, and that's a benefit. I think on my end, I do have, again, normal to dry skin. I don't generally have problems with powder foundations coming off. They always tend to stay really nicely on my skin. And so this one I found lasted all day on me. I think if you're in the combination oily range, you will have to touch up with it. But since it is more like a versatile powder foundation, it's not like over the top full coverage, it's not over the top sheer, I think it will be a really good option to touch up with in those oily areas. I do want to say a lot of people asked me if this was similar to the L'Oreal Infallible that I reviewed last week, and I would say the L'Oreal Infallible one actually has a bit more coverage to it, and I don't know if that's because it's a little bit more creamy, it's not as tightly packed, but I actually found when I used especially the sponge with the L'Oreal one, it had a bit more coverage. Obviously, the color selection, we talked about this, it sucks in the L'Oreal one, but I did find, I do find similarities in these, both very matte, both can give you, this one I would say does bump up to the medium full coverage level. This one is definitely just a solid medium, but overall a lot of similarities between the two of these. So wrapping this up here, I want to go back to my first point, which is that I think it will be a really good option for combination oily people, or let's just say like a bougie or like a glorified setting powder. If you are someone that likes a little bit of extra coverage in your setting powders, I think this would be a nice option as well. For me, as a standalone powder foundation, it is not going to be my go-to. I can see myself using this on top of a liquid on days where I want, you know, like that ultra smooth kind of fuller coverage finish. But ultimately for me, it was a little too dry for my skin type. I just never got the look that I am used to getting with some of my favorite powder foundations. It was just a little too flat for me. I did notice dry areas coming out, especially when I applied it with a sponge. So I think the best way that I'm going to get use out of this is going to be for days when maybe I just want to sweep some on really quick for super sheer application, possibly in the summertime when my skin rolls around to that more normal to combo state. I will say I was hoping for a softer finish on this powder because it is so tightly packed. I think that's where I run into a problem of building it up. I just have to keep applying layer and layer and layer until it gets a little too heavy on my skin. I think if it were a little bit more less packed, a little bit more emollient, I wouldn't have to use as many layers. And so that's why I think it will perform well as just like your standard pressed powder. Combination oily people out there who enjoy pressed powders and enjoy having something to touch up with on the go, I think you're really going to enjoy this. Like I said, longevity on it, really nice. It does have a flat finish. It is definitely going to absorb excess oil on your skin. And despite me having dry skin and applying it, I still felt like it looked smooth. Just a little bit more of the drier smooth. So although it was not an out of the ballpark winner for me, I do recognize that it has capabilities and versatilities that can benefit other skin types. So yeah, that's my review on this. You'll probably see me wearing this here and there as like a setting powder in videos. So I hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know if this is a product you've tried, what your experience has been with it, whether you're combination oily, normal to dry. I hope you enjoyed the review. I hope I answered all of the main questions and topics. If I missed something, you can also leave that down below. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.